Warum müssen Sie jetzt eine Maschine erschalten? Weil jetzt 2 Stunden lang Stille war. Hi guys, it's Turi, so welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing my September wrap-up. I ended up reading only about 7 books in September. I wanted to read a lot more, but it just didn't happen somehow. I don't know. I was trying to get back out of my reading slump from August, and it did happen, but I still didn't read more than 7 books, so I don't know. I'm still not back to my A game, but I think it's fine. So I've prepared some stats for you on this very professional looking sheet of paper. It's super flimsy, but I have, in terms of like ratings, I've had a really good reading month actually. 2 3 stars and 5 4-star reads, and there's several like 4.5 stars in the mix. I didn't have any 5 stars, but I also didn't have any bad books, just in general, so I think that's pretty good. In terms of average rating, that comes to 3.8 stars, and also the average of the average Goodreads ratings of the books I read is 3.8, so I'm pretty like on point with the masses, it would seem. In terms of genres, I had 1 literary fiction / contemporary novel, 1 mystery, 2 thrillers, 1 classic, and 2 memoirs / true crime non-fiction books. So a lot of crime all around pretty much. I only had like about 2 outliers, and the rest was pretty like crime or thriller mystery type books, so I guess that means I am officially in the fall creepy spirit. In terms of pages, I read 2,602 pages, which comes to an average of about 372 per book and an average of 87 pages read a day. In terms of setting, this month was pretty unoriginal. I've had 5 books set in the US and 2 set in England, so you know, nothing all that interesting there. Of the books I read, 4 were written by female authors and 3 were written by male authors. 6 were published between 2000 and 2017, and only 1 was published in 1865. 6 of the 7 were new to me authors, and 4 of them were hyped books, whereas 3 were I would consider not too popular books. And I think that's it for that, so let's get into the actual book reviews. My first 3-star read was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. This Sun edition contains illustrations by Camille Rose Garcia. As you can tell, they're all kind of in this interesting, kind of gothic looking style, but also very heavily reliant on like pinks and stuff like that. I do like the style, but I think the cover is like my favorite of the illustrations. In some of them, like Alice looks just straight up disturbing and creepy, so I don't know, but I still think they're very creative and very well done in general. So I gave this book 3 stars. I definitely don't think that this is one of those books that you can read as an adult, it being a children's book, and like get the same thing out of it. It was fine. Like, if it had been any longer, I would have probably gotten bored out of my mind. This was the first time for me reading this, and I just don't think I was the audience, pretty much. I gave 3 stars because it was okay. It was very weird, obviously, and very just completely random a lot of the times. Some of the word games that the author like plays are kind of interesting, but at the same time they're also a little bit like, oh, this again. So I guess it's just a children's book, like there's nothing I can say about that. But I've read it now, so yay! And then my second 3-star read was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is a sci-fi thriller. Apparently, if you've seen my video where I ranked every single thriller that I've ever read, you maybe noticed that I rated this one only 3 stars, and like I was kind of disappointed by it. This book gets so much hype on BookTube, and everybody's always like, oh, go into it knowing nothing, just like experience it, it's such a wild ride, it's so crazy. And I did exactly that, but I didn't think it was such a wild ride after all. I thought the book was pretty predictable. It's definitely more sci-fi than thriller in my opinion. There aren't any real plot twists, and you kind of get the gist of what's gonna be happening at about 100 pages into it, or even less. And then it just kind of unfolds how you were already thinking it was gonna unfold. At least that's what happened with me. And I don't know, I enjoyed it. I thought it was creepy at some points. There was definitely a sense of like suspense there, but nothing really gripping, and overall I thought it was just okay. Like it was okay, but it didn't blow me away at all. And now let's dive into all those lovely 4 stars. The first is The Last Policeman by Ben H. Winters. This is a dystopian mystery novel set in a world where, well, basically set in our world, but everybody knows that the Earth is going to be destroyed by an asteroid in, I think, about 6 months. And because of that, people have obviously become very depressed, and kind of society has gone completely haywire, and a lot of people have started committing suicide kind of ahead of time. So that premise in itself is really, really interesting. And then this book basically follows, as the title suggests, the last policeman that cares, pretty much is what it should say in brackets after it, because they're still police, but they don't really do much. They just kind of like hang around and mope, pretty much. But he really worked hard to get into the police force, and he still cares very much what happens to the people. And then he encounters a man being strangled that's instantly written off as a suicide, but he's convinced it's not suicide. And he starts to investigate it as a murder, and people obviously calling him crazy, like, why do you even care, why do you want to do it? And he just has like this higher sense of, I don't know, justice or something that he wants to achieve, and that's why he kind of sticks with it, and he feels like he owes it to the people involved to solve the crime. I thought the mystery itself was really interesting, the premise was really interesting, and well, for a lot of people the two don't really make sense, like why would you even care about solving a crime? But like, you could really say that about any crime, you know, like eventually the perpetrator is gonna die, so why would you even persecute them? Like things like that, I feel like you could pretty much justify away the entire like criminal justice system pretty much. So if you like go down that road. So I don't think that there's no merit at all in solving these crimes, especially since there's always still a hint, or like at least for me, I don't know if it came through, like if that was the intention in the book, but for me I always just felt like, well, maybe the asteroid's just not gonna crash into the Earth, like maybe they did the math wrong and whatever. So there's definitely like that little sense of like, but maybe it's not actually gonna happen. And so I still think that adds some validity kind of to the story and to the pursuit of like solving this mystery. So yeah, overall I thought this was a really fast read and really well written, and I really just enjoyed it. And this is actually a trilogy. I think the second book is set like 3 months before the apocalypse, and then the third one is set like a week before the asteroid is supposed to hit or something like that. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna check out the sequels, see what I think about them, and then maybe I'll do like a overall trilogy kind of review, which I've done in the past a few times. So let me know if you'd be interested, and also let me know if you've read this book and what your impression was of it, and if you also think that it's kind of futile to even try to solve a crime in this situation. The next book is actually one that I finished on the 1st of October, but it's really long. It's over 600 pages, and I started it like a couple days before the end of September, and I feel like at this point I literally almost always include the first book I finished in the month in the previous month, because I've still read the majority of it in the previous month, right? This book is The Good Daughter by Karen Slaughter. That actually rhymes. This is my first ever Karen Slaughter novel, and I have heard exclusively pretty much good things about her. I've heard her books are really gruesome and really graphic, and so I went into this with a little bit of trepidation, just because I find it really difficult, obviously, as most people would, to read like super graphic content, especially when it includes things like sexual assault and child abuse and stuff like that. But honestly, I thought this book was pretty mellow, like not mellow, but like pretty mellow, especially compared to what I'd heard of her as an author. This book revolves around 2 girls, Samantha and Charlotte, Sam and Charlie for short, and when they're 13 and 15, somebody breaks into their house pretty much and murders their mother and takes them to the forest to kill them pretty much, and one of them runs away and the other doesn't. And then the book mainly follows Charlie, the younger daughter, the one that ran away, And she is kind of following the footsteps of her father, who is a criminal defense attorney, and he has a really negative reputation in their town because he chooses to represent kind of the unsavory criminals that run around. And now she's like an adult, she's about 40 years old in this book. A shooting occurs at a middle school, and she's pretty much at the scene when it happens and gets involved from there. And then also they discover and like uncover some things about the case that happened in their childhood, stuff like that. It's a very interesting book and I really enjoyed it overall. I thought the story just like flowed really well. It's obviously a little bit slower paced, so that's also a factor of why I didn't find it as thrilling as I was kind of expecting going into it. I feel like it's definitely more focused on the characters rather than on the plot or like creating a sense of suspense or anything like that. It deals a lot with Charlie, like reliving the aftermath of what happened to her and kind of coming to terms with it. And there's also this sense of like unreliable narration, which is also nice because it really keeps you on your toes kind of thing. But at the end of the day, I didn't think it was like as, you know, up there, like the favorite thriller or whatever, just because I didn't think it was that thrilling. I think some parts of it were definitely pretty predictable, and I called like 90% of it. So, you know. And then there was one character, Ben, who is Charlie's like estranged husband, who is literally the worst character ever. He is so boring. He's literally picture perfect all the time, and Charlie somehow still calls him babe even though they've been estranged for like 9 months and they've had troubles in their marriage or whatever. She still calls him babe. It's extremely cringeworthy, and like anytime the two of them pretty much have a conversation, I was like checking out. I just didn't like, I don't know what it was, those scenes always had this really weird feeling to them, and they were so different from other scenes, and I don't know why anytime she talked to her estranged husband, it was just the weirdest thing. I don't know. Let me know if you've had the same experience or if it's just me and something like that's in my head, because I didn't like the writing anymore all of a sudden, and I didn't like the characters anymore. They turned into like different people, particularly Charlie herself. Nevertheless, I really enjoyed the book mainly for the other characters that weren't Ben, and I thought it was really well written, and it's definitely not the most gruesome thing I've ever read. Next I have my first non-fiction book, and that is The Suspicions of Mr. Witcher by Kate Summerscale. This is, it's so beautiful. Look at this edition. It's the Bloomsbury Modern Classics edition, the same one that I also have The Song of Achilles in. I think it is absolutely stunning, and this book was also really, really great. It is about the very first detective pretty much in modern history. That was Mr. Witcher in the 1860s in London, and Kate Summerscale kind of explores the murder case that kind of started his career as a detective in a sense, or like that brought him to the attention of the media and the public. She delves into this crime, she delves into Mr. Witcher as a person, and she also delves into just in general kind of detective literary fiction, looking at like the origin of certain words that we are now extremely familiar with, such as sleuth and clue, and like where they came from, and like when this whole vocabulary developed. So that's what I found was really interesting. I also really liked the parts that focused on this crime. This crime basically took place at a estate, and this is like the home of the Kent family, and one night the little boy of the house, he's like only 2 or 3 years old, gets murdered, and first the police get involved, but they kind of do a really bad job. Like they don't really interview the family members because it's kind of like improper and stuff like that. This sort of sense of Victorian propriety kind of comes at their detriment, because the like most crucial time in the investigation of a murder is basically wasted because they don't dare to like do a proper job of it. And then eventually Mr. Witcher gets involved, and he has to kind of work his way through their mistakes and kind of make up for their mistakes. And he comes to some conclusions that the media doesn't agree with and most people don't agree with, and that he has no like actual tangible proof for, so he gets pretty much destroyed by newspapers. In the eye of the public, basically, he's a disgrace, and it really ruins his career to a degree. So maybe this review sounds like really all over the place. I'm really sorry, but it's kind of similar to the book. It kind of jumps back and forth a little bit between describing the crime, describing the suspects, and like Mr. Witcher as a person, like we learn a lot about him personally, and then again about this, like the whole genre of this fictionalized detective work and stuff like that. So I found this really interesting, but I understand that maybe not everyone would like this because it does go into a lot of detail on all these other things as well, and not just like the crime itself. That's definitely the most compelling part. But I would say if you're at all interested in this, give it a go. It's really well written and just really interesting. And if you're like a fan of detective stories, this is definitely for you, I would say. Second to last, I have my second non-fiction book, and this is The Fact of a Body, A Murder and the Memoir by Alexandria Marsano-Lesnevich. This is a very long name, I'm sorry. This book, where do I even start? This book is, as the title suggests, about a murder, and it's also a memoir. The author herself went to law school and started to become a lawyer, and she wanted to work to get people off death row because since she was a child, she was convinced that the death penalty is wrong, so she was working against that. But then the first time pretty much that she encounters any death penalty cases, she comes across the case of Rick Langley. He is also a child molester, and he murdered a 6-year-old boy after molesting him pretty much. And this case causes the author to question her stance on the death penalty pretty much because of her own history with child abuse. So when she was a child, she was abused for several years. And so this book basically looks at those two cases, her own case and that of Rick Langley and his victim, and it explores both of them, and it draws a lot of parallels, some of them maybe a little bit far-fetched, but I think overall it brought it all really well together. It's definitely a really hard book to read, and I'm sure it must have been an even harder book to write because Marsano-Lesnevich kind of explores her own abuse in almost like graphic detail, and I mean just writing this down and like sharing it with the world must have been incredibly difficult. And she does say that it's like writing this book kind of was cathartic for her in a sense and kind of helped her to come to terms with what happened to her. Also in like looking at this case of Rick Langley, realized that not everything is like black and white, and that for example, Rick Langley's family history and childhood heavily contributed to his issues, and while she doesn't excuse his actions at all, she realizes that the truth is often much more complicated than just saying this is an evil person or this is a good person. Everybody, or like most people, are a little bit of everything, and that this situation, this reality of life, is often not directly reflected in the law, and it's really difficult to you know, generalize things like this or like decide cases this clear cut when they're really not. Overall, I really enjoyed the book. It's definitely hard to read, as I said, and if you are sensitive to the subject, I recommend just passing it by, because it's, even to somebody who has no personal experience with any of this, luckily, it was hard to read and it like weighed on my mind, and anytime I put it down, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I thought it was, you know, very intense, very well written, and very interesting, but definitely hard to read. By the way, I gave The Fact of the Body 4.5 stars, and I also gave this last book 4.5 stars, and that is The Idiot by Elif Batuman. My favorite book I read this month. It's about a 19-year-old or 18-year-old girl called Selin. She's of Turkish descent, but she's from the US, and she gets into Harvard, and pretty much that's the plot. Her life at Harvard. She starts taking Russian classes in which she meets Ivan from Hungary, and she kind of develops a crush on him, but he has a girlfriend, and the two write these extremely pretentious and like nonsensical emails back and forth, and their relationship sort of develops but also stagnates a lot. I really don't know.
Hello darkness, my old friend.
So my camera cut off. I have no idea what I just said. I'm already so frustrated because also they just turned on their machine again, so now we have this sound in the back again. Yay. They have a lot of misunderstandings going on because I feel like both of them refuse to properly talk to one another. And then in the summer holidays, he goes back to Hungary and she kind of follows him to teach English in small Hungarian villages. And yeah, that's pretty much the plot. I feel like overall this book is really just about Selin's time at Harvard, how she feels like an idiot because she realizes that she has a lot of academic knowledge, like intellectual knowledge, but not a lot of like real life you know, knowledge, specifically when it comes to love. Like, she's pretty bad at love. I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was very much like stream of consciousness almost, and pretty much we just follow her daily life, as I've said. I've said before, I feel like this book would be good for people like me who enjoy watching daily vlogs where you kind of follow these people do inane and seemingly like really mundane things, but you still kind of enjoy it and you still find it interesting because you care about the people doing them. And that's sort of the same here, I feel like. I really wanted to know just what she was getting up to, and you know, the book is pretty long, but I still would have liked it to be even longer because I just enjoyed it that much. My favorite part about it too was that it was so funny. The book is really heavy on dry humor, and it almost seems accidentally funny at times. Like the humor is just a side product and not at all what is intended in a sense. Because you'd have like no lead up at all to these really funny lines that actually made me laugh out loud sometimes. So I really enjoyed this book. Again, I understand it's not for everyone, but if based on this review you think it could be for you, I definitely recommend checking it out because I thought it was fantastic. Alright, and that is it for my September wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please give it a like and subscribe to my channel for new videos every Tuesday and Friday. Also let me know in the comments down below how your reading month went, and also if you've read any of the books that I showed today. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you very soon with another video. In the meantime, head on over here to check out some other videos I recently did, and I will see you then. Have a lovely week. Bye!